Cow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Honor
and Chris Ramos,
and our featured guest,
Shawn Hainsworth from SHP Comics.
Awesome. Yeah, tonight we get to interview Shawn and talk about Woodstake, his original comic that he came up with, and just all about that and what at SPH Comics, where they come in and how we started with them and all those interesting indie details.
Yeah, it's like we've been talking about indie comics for a while, and SHP Comics came up and said, hey, I've been working on a project, and for us, it's like, great, we want to actually bring in some of that, talent, some of that
the grassroots,
big brain thinking, right,
Absolutely.
Shawn?
Hopefully I can live up to big brain tonight.
Sure.
Why don't you tell us at least a little bit about like how you started, even just comics in general, not necessarily this one, but just like what brought you into just the comic realm?
What's your comic book origin?
Yeah, my origin story. It's pretty simple, actually. So I started in a parallel universe in film. And so I studied film in college, and I made a bunch of I made a bunch of documentaries. So an even more parallel universe, way back when. But was always into visual storytelling. Was really taken by The Watchmen as a kid. That was the first comic book that like totally rocked my world. And I was kind of, an indie comic geek. I liked, Daniel Close's 8 Ball and some of the other things. I was never a huge kind of, Marvel DC guy. I kind of lived on the periphery a little bit. But ended up writing a bunch of screenplays and some, abandoned novels over the years. And at a certain point, I just thought, you know what, I actually want to make these. I don't want to just write these screenplays to sit in my computer and do nothing. I want to actually produce them. And it just, a bunch of things came together where, I was, at a Comic-Con and talking to several people and meeting artists. And I was like, you know what, I can actually do this. I can't draw at all. And so I found, some great artists. And I've got 3 series going right now, really with completely different art styles, which is very cool. So the one we're going to talk about tonight, Woodstake, it's about a vampire at Woodstock. The tagline is 3 days of peace, music, and blood.
That's the best.
Perfect.
I love it.
So I'm not sure how much the younger generation these days knows about Woodstock. I think they're pretty hip, and they know, that it was a music festival and it took place and it had a lot of hippies in it. But I had just a great time. Like, this idea came to me, and it was one of those, haha, Woodstock, funny idea. But the more I started to think about it, the more I started to develop it, the more it just really came together, both in terms of the comedy. So of course the vampires tripping on LSD at some point, and there's just, but also in terms of like what really stood out as I got into it was that Woodstock and the hippie generation, it was just the ultimate kind of optimistic, naive, we can change the world, we can all live in peace, and love.
The concept of free love,
the concept of free love and changing the world and all of that. And nothing slams up against that more than a vampire, which is like the most cynical creature in the history of the world, just sucks the life out of people and discards their corpses, and is just purely self-centered, endlessly feeding, and has no larger purpose in mind. So it ended up being kind of really fun to bring this world, the hippie world, together with the vampire world.
Yeah, that's like so like clashing each other, but that's such a brilliant challenge and writing challenge, especially. So that's really cool and original, and I like that idea.
Yeah, I kind of picked up on that a little bit too, of just like, this is sort of like anti, elements, like you had said, that what better way to kind of disrupt Woodstock a little bit would be to unleash some sort of monster.
Yeah.
And the best thing about like vampires and things is that they're not immediately known. It's not like you're dumping Godzilla right into the whole mix or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is kind of fun to say, all right, well, how would they work their way through, and how would people react?
Yeah. And they're the perfect creature to hide in plain sight too.
Yeah. and then rooting it into a historical event really helps, I think, the reader just solidify the story for them and say, wow, this is, I don't have to think too much about this world or this day or what this
Sure.
concert is, they already kind of know that background, so you don't have to
Yeah.
work so hard to
Sure.
really
It's
put it
it's got
into
some
a
grounded and like reality
yeah, like
or
sometimes
historical
people say,
events.
well, I don't really know what time frame this is. Well, here you go.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I stuck. So the idea was like there was so much weird stuff going on at Woodstock to begin with that nobody would even notice a vampire. And of course, I got the vampire dressed up in the '60s duds, and like
Yep.
there's just
Yeah,
lots
yeah.
of visual humor there. But I stuck really closely with what happened at the festival, given the timeline, and I actually had a big map of the festival,
Oh, cool.
so where people are. And it was really fun because there was just some great moments that came together. Like there's a moment where the action is rising at the end of Saturday night. And I look at the playlist and it's Creedence Clearwater's Bad Moon on the Rise, just
Yeah.
like
That was
perfect
perfect.
timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the idea is that this could have slipped into Woodstock, and the only thing different would be about 5 or 6 people would have gone missing. But
Right.
otherwise, the festival would have just kind of continued on the way it did.
So
Absolutely.
if we were to just kind of dive a little bit into your written by, art by, lettering, so what we're getting is you were the brainchild of this, and then as far as um, Shawn Hainsworth Productions, you're then building the team to make this happen, right?
Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you
So
walk us
first
through
I
that?
Yeah, first I met Philippe Kroll. He's a young Brazilian artist. Really awesome, great guy, and we just kind of hit it off immediately. And when I wrote this, it started out as a screenplay. So I found it really interesting to convert a screenplay into sequential art and pages and panels, and have to really think about the flow of the action and how to best tell the story, and even the page turns and the spreads, and to really think about how it would all go together.
We
And
talk about
Philippe,
that quite a bit too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I actually find comic sequential art to be really satisfying because it's really challenging. You don't have actors, you don't have motion, you don't have a soundtrack, you've got nothing to save you. You only have your ability to tell a story within these panels, and how much time shifts between one panel and the next. It could be milliseconds, it could be days, right? And you have to convey all of that. So that was really challenging and really fun, like so satisfying creatively to do that. But the other fun thing is that Philippe does kind of 3D models of
Yeah.
things,
Okay.
and then he paints on top of it. So it's a very rough kind
Wow.
of digital painting style.
Okay.
But what's great about the 3D models is that we can kind of fly the camera around. And so the camera does the quote unquote camera, all of a sudden you're on top looking down, or you're like at this perfect angle. And so that gave us a chance to really, think about how we were going to tell this story, and how we were going to, what perspective we were going to use. We're working on issue 2 right now, and there's a scene in a diner. And, I mean, I actually like got some old '60s diners photographs, and, kind of put in where I thought things should be. I send that off to him, and he builds these models and comes back with them. We go over it. And then once we've got it the way we want it, he paints it. And it's been a really
Ah,
great process.
Huh.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
because
pretty cool.
even just looking through the first few pages here, not only is he using sort of I think I call it atmosphere effects, where it's like there's the fog, and then there's sort of like your point of view, and like how far could you actually see across this field, or how far
Yeah.
could you see across the room. And he kind of puts things in and out of focus, and it doesn't feel like digital really.
No,
it
it's like
it's very
halfway. Yeah.
painterly, and
Hybrid.
I said, wow, if these aren't actual paintings, he's using a very loose brush in the digital world, and just really, really kind of, caking it on, I guess, and making
Yeah.
it textural. So
Yeah.
I
Like that
really like
action
that.
shot of
Yeah.
him throwing the steak. That was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah. And it's cool because he's blurring things that have action to them, and he's able to get away with it because he's just real loose, and I don't know. I think the digital brushes he's using are just probably just about as close to some sort of you know actual sable brush in real life. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
really,
they have
really
texture,
great.
like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And actually, in the second issue, he's been getting more painterly.
Oh,
We've been and he's been like, "Hey, is it okay if I, do this?" And so, like, the background maybe just like real big strokes of kind of abstract color. And I'm told the good thing is that it's a pure collaboration. So it's like, yeah, like you follow your muse. If you go way too far and everything's blurry and we can't tell what's going on, then we'll have to readjust. But yeah, so he's actually getting more painterly, and I think that'll increase in the next issues, that
yeah,
he's having a lot more fun with the brushstrokes.
absolutely. And you said this was going to be a 7-issue series?
Yeah. So and actually what's funny is, so it's Woodstake, but in this first issue, they don't even get to the festival, right?
No, it's just talk of going to the festival, the
Yeah,
journey.
so
Yeah.
it's going to take like 3 issues to get to the festival. Because when I wrote
Sure.
this whole thing, I mean, the idea was, okay, there's a vampire at Woodstock, but do I just throw a vampire at Woodstock and just everyone says, okay, there's a vampire at Woodstock, or do I do the backstory? And I decided I had to do a backstory. Like, I had to have some reason why there's a vampire in upstate New York at this point in time. And I also wanted my Van Helsing character, because I stuck, the other tagline I use for this is classic vampires, classic rock. So
I love it. This bumper stickers, man.
Exactly, yeah. Because I love Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, that's just, to me, I just love that novel. And so my vampire world is really a Bram Stoker world. I'm not innovating anything when it comes to the vampire. So I do have the Van Helsing character, who in this is of course called Von Halen. But
I love it. Great trivia.
Yeah. But anyway, it's going to take like 3 issues to get to the festival. So I really want people to hop on board and then stay with me, because I think it's going to be a fun ride. A lot of the humor comes out when we get to the festival, and there's hippies everywhere. But we're just kind of laying the scene right now. I had to introduce my main characters and introduce my vampire and all that.
Yeah, because this comic opens up in 1927 and just starts introducing sort of this.
This
I
family
kind of
almost of like you said, like a Van Helsing type of character.
Yeah,
the bounty hunter.
And I like that it sort
warrior.
of sets up like a curse on this family, sort of, where you see that this isn't just something that's like you said, just dumped into the 60s. This is like sort of a long build, and you kind of get this like heritage fighter, right?
Yeah,
Like, or
the
just,
legacy.
yeah, someone who remembers stories from their dad and their grandpa, and you kind of touch on that a little bit later, where he's talking to him, and they meet up again, and they're like, did your dad tell you how this happened and when they were on the force? So you kind of get it, like, okay, it's the same people who live in sort of that same world, but this is mythology and lore that's being passed down. And they kind of just, I got it that they picked up on, there was no hesitation when they were going to be called upon to have action, which is a good way to kind of set up any kind of character, is just to say it's like it's in
embedded,
them. It's embedded in them,
it's
to like react.
Yeah. It's like a legacy. It's inevitable. And then and the good thing about that is, if I set all that motivation up early, then when we get to the festival, we can just really get into it and not have to worry too much about
flashing back or anything.
Flashing back and everything else. So this story is going to move pretty straight.
It has that good flow.
Because the festival is Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. They were distinct acts and distinct whatever. So I'm not sure yet. Originally I thought like 1 issue per day, but I don't think that's going to work with the story. So I think, but we're going to follow the story very linearly once we get into the festival. There's no going back in time at that point.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're kind of working through your dialogue, are you guys putting in sort of placeholders for the text bubbles, or are you just doing the art and then figuring out where the text bubbles are going after that?
Yeah. So initially, Philippe did some text bubbles, but we both kind of looked at him and just thought, and he's like, you know what, this isn't my strong suit. I'm not a letterer. That's something I've really come to appreciate, is what a letterer brings to a project. And so, I hooked up with this letterer named SK. He's also a creator. He lives in Australia. Really great guy. And, the other thing I love about the comic book world is people have been so friendly and so open. He's like, taking me aside and showing me stuff in InDesign and walking me through stuff and taking time to teach me stuff, and just like a great guy. So at this point, yeah, he's figuring out where the bubbles are going. And that's all been taken off of Philippe. And S is just has a great sense of how to position the bubbles, how to break up lines into multiple bubbles, how to attach the tails. He's just really good at that. He's just got a great sense of it. So yeah, so it's been that was like the last step. When I looked at the first 10 pages, I thought this is great, but I just wasn't sure about the lettering. And then when we brought S in, everything came together.
Oh.
Yeah.
So would you say, I guess, by the sign of the times and the whole pandemic and stuff, would this would have happened like 5 years ago, or do you think because of how far technology has come and just the environment we live in, it's easier to connect
The
and do
collaboration
the
part. Yeah, yeah,
collaboration
yeah.
part?
It's so much easier to connect now. It's amazing. Like Philippe's in Brazil. So the other comic series, The Killing Machine, which is a science fiction series, the artist is in Montreal. And the third one, the artist is in Germany. I've met none of them in person. I've
Wow.
never,
Okay.
I've never
Yeah,
met
absolutely.
S in person. He lives in Australia. Like, maybe I'll go to a con at some point, and we'll in Sydney and we'll meet up. But
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it's all just over the computer now. And Philippe, I just found just kind of looking through all kinds of websites, and I found his stuff, and I went to his website, and I was like, yeah, that's my guy. Like, I loved
Cool.
his style. I loved that painted style.
Yeah.
And so I pursued him.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That's amazing. Just what we can do these days.
Well, yeah, and you always hear those stories back in the day when Marvel and DC are, having artists who moved even out of state and they're still doing pages for them, and they gotta
Yeah.
like, I
Ship
gotta
it in the
get to,
mail.
yeah, I gotta
Yeah.
get to the post, and I know the post will get it overnight to them, and
Yeah.
they, are shipping full pages that are ready to
sure.
be inked, and it's like, and then
Yeah.
they make their changes and send them back because
Right.
I
Or
was like,
some
oh
would
my
be like,
gosh,
well, I guess I could move to the area to make
yeah,
life a whole lot easier.
yeah, run your portfolio down the
Down the
street.
street. Yeah.
But yeah, I only mentioned the lettering because when you're looking through this, um, sometimes when I'm reading comics, if it's really dialogue heavy, then you start seeing like, I don't know, you start just going from one text bubble to the next, and you
Right.
kind of lose the page a little bit.
Yeah,
And you just figure, well, I'm just going to kind of get this really heavy into my brain so I know where the story's going because they're trying to explain something that's like, super intense. But this one, it's it's not dialogue heavy. I mean, if I were to say, it's kind of like, you know, 15% of the page, 10% of the page is
Right. Yeah.
dialogue, which is great.
Yeah.
But the text bubbles and the, when the phone's ringing, it's, you got the words
Yeah.
ring, ring, and they're
Yeah.
kind
I
of
like
like
all the sound
off
effects.
tilter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really adds to it and gives it more storytelling
Yeah.
too.
And the text is supposed to move you to where you want your eye to go next to
Right.
bring you to the next person or the next action, because
Yeah.
otherwise they are just static image.
Hmm.
yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I've tried really hard to slim the dialogue down, like, to the bare minimum.
Okay. So it was
That's
intentional. Yeah.
yeah, because, well, yeah, you can't cover up too much of these paintings, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is a
Especially with
visual
his style.
medium.
Yeah.
It's funny though. Initially, I tried to be very pure and have it like all visual with like very little
Oh wow.
sound effects or whatever, and I found that just didn't engage me as much. I know a lot of people love
Sure.
that style,
Hmm.
but being a writer, I wanted to have some words, and I thought I could, deepen the story and deepen the characters with just a small amount of dialogue. So yeah, I think 10-15% is good, and if I can keep it at that level, then that'll be great. Because yeah, I don't want it to be too heavy, and I'm trying not to use any, just captions other than, date and time where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's working well. So, well, it's really, it's like you said. So we were sent sort of the earlier just PDFs we're going through, which is a really nice way to see it and read it.
The PDF.
Yeah, the PDF, and just kind of see, we're reading it on our computers, of course, or our tablets, and if anyone ever has a chance to kind of get that digital read, it doesn't take away too much. We started the podcast with the original idea of just like collected editions and hardcovers, but
Yeah.
we've found ourselves dipping into digital just because it's I think
Accessible.
accessible to read some older comics or to like read some newer
Yeah. Fresh off the
projects.
press.
Yeah, yeah, or before the press. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what this is, pre-press.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so I also, do fundraising on Kickstarter, and you
Okay.
just got to have the digital reward, right? There's
Right.
the people who just want to get the PDF. Now, the PDF you guys got is a smaller PDF that can be mailed around,
Okay.
emailed around.
Sure.
It's like 7 meg. The ones that
Mm-hmm.
we deliver to backers and stuff are bigger and higher res.
Oh.
So a little nicer, and I'm happy to send you a higher res one too.
Oh,
But
sure.
yeah, just the ones that go out, because otherwise the email complains, or you have to send someone a link and force them to go to Google
Yeah.
Drive and download it
Oh,
and all of that.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've got a local printer that I work with in Massachusetts that's great, and
Oh,
also
cool.
getting some guest artists to do a variant cover. Because actually, on the cover we have like
that's
the
cool.
vampire, the
Yeah.
classic vampire. But I want a variant cover that's definitely got more of a psychedelic 60s
Oh,
vibe.
yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's not in Philippe's wheelhouse. That's not his strong
Hmm.
point.
Okay.
So that's where the guest artist comes in, and we're going to
Sure.
do some really nice prints of collector's editions or variant covers and all that kind of stuff. Because I much prefer a comic book in my hand as well. So yeah, you
Yeah.
can definitely
Hmm.
go to the Kickstarter and back it and get a PDF.
Okay.
But yeah, ideally we want to get print copies out there, and really nice print copies, right? Like with nice covers, nice paper, that kind of stuff.
So
Cool.
Sean, where would someone go then? What's the Kickstarter name so that they know?
Well, so I'm kickstarting a new comic, which is not Woodstake, called
Okay.
Aerotech, Erotech.
Yeah.
And but what's great about Kickstarter now is that I'm offering the SHP Comics bundle. So you can get
Oh,
the
okay.
bundle of all 3 SHP Comics digital edition. You can get the bundle of the print edition. You can get the bundle of the collector's edition. So
That's cool.
and then
It's good
there's also
variety. Yeah.
add-ons. So you can get like the digital Aerotech, but you could get a print copy of Woodstake or whatever you want. So yeah, it makes it nice because I can keep kind of developing the readers.
Yeah.
Even though I've got one thing being Kickstarter right now, I can hopefully develop the readers, get a sense of the brand that we have. I think we have really good comics, multiple comics. So yeah, I also am going to be selling stuff on my website directly. So if you want to get a print copy,
Okay.
shpcomics.com, and yeah, you can get print copies that way as well.
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, people are, I think, okay with all mediums because we've had a lot of guys, even in our comic book group, who have huge libraries full of just tons
Yeah.
of collected editions, hardcovers,
Sure.
and then they say, all right, guys, I'm going all digital. Like
Right.
there might come a point where it's like, all right, this is taking over my whole apartment.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I'm going digital, and I'm on the train a lot, or I'm traveling a lot, quite a bit, and it becomes unwieldy to grab a giant volume of a book. And
Right.
um, there is, I think, a fair amount of all publishers
Mhm.
embracing both sides of that
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
they want their readers. In the end, the most important thing is getting into the reader's hands. And if you say, well, we're never doing digital, you're just going to cut out an entire block of
Yeah, absolutely. There's a
great
bunch of readers that
next
just want to
generations.
read digital.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
you got to go where the readers are. I think
Hmm.
the disappointing. What's great is you can have like a fairly big 8-inch, 10-inch tablet now, and the quality's good. I think what's disappointing to a lot of people is just what happened with Comixology, which had a
Hmm.
better reader, and now we're in a place where we just don't have that quality of reader. But someone's going to fill that space,
Oh,
either.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's only going to get better, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What's interesting from the creator perspective is the panel view, right? So
Hmm.
you can create the panel views. Actually, Global Comics probably has the best panel view creator of any of them.
Oh.
But
Okay.
in a way, it's good to guide the reader's eye because you want them to not just be looking at a full screen. But on the other hand, part of the joy of a comic is letting your eye wander and back and forth across the
Hmm.
page. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird thing. And none of my panels are particularly square. In Woodstake, they're much squarer than the other comics.
Okay.
So it really becomes harder to figure out that panel view. But once again, I think this will all get better as resolutions get better and readers get better and software gets better. But yeah, no, it's a major way of delivering what people want. So that's what you got to do.
Yeah,
Right.
and I've got hundreds of comics on Comixology. And for just a little bit of a background here, on a normal comic book page, there might be 6 to 8 panels, just so our
Yeah.
listeners know. And you can set it where you're just reading a full page and then you go to another full page, another full page. Well, most of the time, especially if you're on like your laptop, that
Right.
page is sort of set up as a portrait mode instead of landscape. So it becomes a little hard because some of the wording gets really small.
Sure.
So then they came up with panel mode, which just goes from one panel, then you hit your
Zooms
space
in.
bar, goes to the
Yeah.
next one, next one, next
Yeah,
one, next
that
one.
one too.
And what I liked about that is at the end, it would zoom out and show the whole page,
The whole page. Yeah.
and then go to the next panel, 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 whole page. And you kind of like realize that you do miss quite a bit, because sometimes it is hard to just say, well, here's where the panel is, and you see sort of a motion or a mechanic in the corner,
Right.
and you're like, what's that? And then when you
Mhm.
get out to the whole page, you realized it was part of the page.
Right. It's all the fine detail.
Yeah, I would imagine some like old Steranko comics and stuff would be like totally cut off, because it's just like you said, they're just all over the place.
Sure.
But yeah, you had mentioned Watchmen as a sort of an inspiration for you back in the day, and right now I let my brother borrow Watchmen because I said, you've got to read this. It's just one of those things that are just, they took the medium and they showed everyone that you can have serious themes, serious characters, adult content to the point of absorbing what you want and then putting it to the side, right?
Mhm.
And that one you have to kind of like read a little bit by bit and then just sort of absorb it.
Right.
Woodstake was a lot of fun for us because for me it flowed really well. Like
It
I read
did.
it really
Yeah.
not like fast, but I read it
No,
just sort of like I
slow it
understood
down,
what was happening.
absorb the panel, the art,
Yeah.
what's being said.
And you don't feel
how it
like you're
reflects.
missing anything, but
Mhm.
if you just sort of linger on a page for a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to look at some of
Right,
these other
like
details.
a horror movie. Like you're watching a horror movie. It's
Yeah.
not like going super fast all the time, depending on the movie.
Yeah,
You
like you
to
can set
absorb
your
it
own
and
pace.
build up that suspense.
So would you say your other
That's great to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
because I really care about the flow of the story, right? Like, so you're, you want to make it as interesting visually as possible, but you never want someone to be like, what the heck am I looking at? Or how,
Right.
you want it to be where it's just kind of a continuous experience and the story is unfolding. Yeah, so that's really nice to hear, because that's what I really try to bring to it, is just that sense of flow, right? So
Yes.
so it is a compelling read. Like you start and then you're done with the chapter, and the issue. I'm calling the issues chapters just because
All right.
I like the idea of having each issue centered on kind of an idea or a single plot arc. So but yeah, anyway, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a problem.
We read a lot of panels, so it's
Mhm.
it's nice to see like, all right, this is cool. It really breaks it down. I felt like it was almost cinematic a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, and because you do jump a little bit from like, inside looking out and then up looking down and then someone standing over you, and you get the idea, like you said, that there is an actual camera, that you're not just sort of a viewer watching this play out in front of you. You kind of feel
Yeah.
like you're in there.
Right.
And I always pay attention to that a lot in comics because, in some of those, like, I don't
Old
know,
school?
Captain America
Yeah,
comics
Silver
and
Age,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Like everyone's really up close all the time. Like all
Mhm.
they do is portraits. And you're
Yeah.
like, gosh, I'm just sitting right next to you guys. And it is nice to sort of back up a little bit.
Sure.
And then you run into someone like, George Starlin, who's just like,
Jim Starlin.
or
yeah.
Jim Starlin, sorry, who's just like way, way, way backed up. Like
Oh,
you're
right.
seeing an entire, continent pretty much.
The
So
cosmos.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great to compare that. And I just think that the style here really set it out. It's a very, I don't know, not like we were surprised, but it was like, oh, this is really refreshing.
Yeah,
it's like
that's
nice.
a refresher that breaks it up a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great little brainchild here. We enjoyed it. It was
looking forward to the
it was-
next issue for
yes,
sure.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the next issue definitely gets a little darker and hope a little more interesting. So
Okay.
as we get more into the ethos of the 60s, and there's the recently returned Vietnam vet, and we're getting closer to the festival, and all of that. So I'm excited for the next one too. And actually, Philippe is drawing page 11 as we speak.
Cool.
So yeah,
Awesome.
issue 2 will be ready like July probably.
I was
So
just
it's
gonna say,
coming.
so what is your intended publication dates and sort of timeline for these kinds of things?
Yeah, so Woodstake, I am expecting the printer to call me any day and say they're ready for pickup.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm going to start delivering them to some local comic shops, and make them available on the website. The Kickstarter runs until June 15th, so we'll be fulfilling a bunch of copies out from that. And then, issue 2 probably done in July. I have a PDF to send out in July. And probably it will go to press sometime in August. I'll probably do a variant cover for that one as well. I love working with other artists and having other visions come into it. So probably August for issue 2. And then I'm really hoping like 4 months an issue. So, we could be done with Woodstake by, the end of next year,
Sure.
which would be pretty cool.
And that's good, not to sort of like stretch it out. But I like that you're having other projects at the same time so that you can say, hey, in between here, maybe you get like that sort of good, train running.
Yeah, keep your publications and all your
yeah,
books and showing
the
other
excitement
audience
going from all of
like
that.
what else we have. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I got a bunch of other ideas, but I'm like, no,
Yeah.
stay with what you don't bite off when you can chew, right? So right
Yeah.
now with these 3, we're gonna get these going, and then maybe next year I'll unleash the beast of some of these ideas that are bubbling up.
Can I ask, what was the most like surprising thing you've learned throughout like working in the indie world and working in comics that you've like learned about along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple things. One is, I think, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is just the comics world is a great world of really friendly people who just love comics, right? Really refreshing from the film world, which is just very different.
Sure.
So I think just it feels like there's a community here that's really great, really supportive, and people are doing their own thing, which is great about indie creators. Like there's so many indie creators, and everybody's got their vision and their perspective and their story to tell. And there's no filter now between you and these creators. Like you can go find all kinds of stuff, and so that I think is the best thing. I think the other thing also really positive is how much I love this process. Like I really, and just to see it come together and hold the first copy in my hand, it's just really exciting. Like I find it so satisfying to try to tell stories in this way. Even more challenging in some ways than doing them, as a short film or something else. So the surprising thing is that I love comics, like how much I love comics. So,
Good.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Hopefully I'll be around for a while and can put some out there and bring these stories to fruition, find an audience, and all of that. It's just a lot of work with the Kickstarters and the marketing and the social media,
Sure.
printers, and the this and the that. That's I guess the one downside is there's just so much work to do. I'd love to be writing more, but now it's like, no, got to get this to the printer, got to get this, so. But anyway, I'm not complaining, even though I sound like I'm complaining.
No, it's that part of the industry that everyone, like they like the collaboration part, they like the creation part, and then you're like, oh yeah, I gotta kind of self-promote this too, So
Yeah.
there's that whole end of it. The other monster that's like, now I just gotta like show this what I did, look what I made, right?
Yeah.
No, it's definitely easier, and like you said, there's a lot of people out there who are artists and creators that are not in it just to like reinvent the wheel. They want to be able to have a voice and build something and then say, look, that was in my head and now it's out so everyone else can see. And that's the part of being a creator.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, like the next time you're at a Comic-Con, go to Artist Alley and just walk up to people and start a conversation with them. Like, what are you doing? Where'd this idea come from? And you will get some great stories. Really, really interesting people. And so you can walk through and browse and stuff, but it's like start up some conversations because you'll find some really, really friendly, interesting people who like to talk about their work. Who doesn't like to talk about their work?
Right,
Yeah, I
right.
found that at just like at the local con up in Milwaukee, I've gotten so many contacts and follow up interviews, and just engaging in their art. Like, oh, that's a cool character, and then they're like, oh yeah, they just love to talk about their work and the story of how that came and their process, and just what you like have a share common interest in art, like artist or
Hmm.
a writer or something, and just go nuts about that. And like, hey, you want to hang out? You want to talk?
Yeah.
And of course, everyone wants that, measure of success, and that would be an amazing thing, to reach a bigger, broader audience. But at the same time, those are the people, and that's the people that we all want to just sort of rub elbows with, and
Yeah, that
just
build a community.
yeah, and say it's an inviting community, and it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
really great job
right.
on, even just building your production company in general.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
everyone out there, this is the inspiration story.
Yeah. You can do it.
Right. Okay. Next fun question. If you could write any character, who would you write?
You mean
Mm.
a sort of an existing character that I would write
Sure. Yeah.
for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actually, I was really intrigued with your, and maybe just because I listened to your Darth Vader episode.
Sure.
Um, but I think that would be great, is to take a beloved villain, beloved
Mm-hmm.
in quotes,
Yeah.
and build out the backstory. I think that's pretty cool.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'd have to think about that. Also,
Because
I feel like other people's work, Star Wars now kind of is just so big. It belongs to
right.
a lot of people, right? There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who helped create the Star Wars universe, and you can imagine being part of that universe. But for a lot of people, it's their stuff, and I would never want to touch somebody else's stuff, right?
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, I think when I get the call from Lucasfilms to develop a Darth Vader book, I will
Sure.
not.
You'll have
Every,
to really twist your arm for that one.
yeah, everything's going on hold.
Sure.
Well, and that just goes to show too that villains are kind of, I don't want to say that they're rising in popularity, but you know, everyone wants to see both sides of the coin. And if you're
Yeah.
reading a story and there's a great villain that pops up, the first reaction even for me is like, wow, where'd they, what's their story? How are they where they are right now?
Yeah.
And like you said, you go back to Bram Stoker because that's the Dracula influence that was really the game changer for just about everyone in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Same idea for comic book characters or heroes and villains is that you can always dip back and find a period of time where they were
Yeah.
quiet, like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to tell a story right
Right.
in this story
Like right now,
pocket.
they're talking about like between episode 3 and 4. What happened?
Yeah,
Well, da, 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 da,
there's a
da,
lot of
da,
years
da.
in there, so let's figure this
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Well, and also, yeah, how somebody got there. I mean, the origin story, right, is always
Yeah.
how did someone become a villain? How did someone, ultimately make the choice to cut off a certain part of their humanity and
Mm-hmm.
choose this route? Because actually, so I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan when I was a kid, and you don't get any of that with Sauron, right? He's just kind of like
No.
the evil eye
Very.
in the
Yeah.
sky. And what's it now that that Tolkien wrote that during the World War II, and that he was kind of
Mm-hmm.
writing a parable about evil incarnate, that makes sense. But and I haven't read the Silmarillion, and I'm sure the Lord of
I
the
know
Rings
I haven't
Yeah.
either,
geeks
but I hear
will
so
be
many
all
stories
over
coming out
me.
of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's more in there about his backstory. But I do think it's really interesting to think about how someone became a villain. I think we're all
Yeah.
intrigued by the possibilities for human, behavior, our capacity for evil. I think it's intriguing and kind of tittillating to all of us to put ourselves in that role of someone who chose evil.
Sure.
Well, and I always like in any of the books that I read is when, a lot of the authors that I really enjoy, they like Brandon Sanderson, he sets like a rule. So like in his books, it's like, this is a good person and they're always good and they do good. And you're like, oh, cool. And you read good, 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 good. And
Right.
then one day there's like this catalyst and now they're evil. So it's like, okay, so how does someone make that switch,
Yeah.
or, this particular rule of magic, it's always been this way and it's just a way of nature, and then
Mm-hmm.
boom, it switches. So
Right. What's that trigger? Yeah.
yeah, and that's that's always sort of like the other shoe drops, and now this is the direction of the story. And so I don't know,
Yeah.
that always catches me, and I think a lot of people look for that even in movies or any kind of media, is like, how is this going to switch the story? And it's like, aha, there it is.
Yeah.
And like
Right.
even like Jurassic Park, like, what was the catalyst? Oh, there it is. So it's a
Sure.
good way to sort of see that climax and kind of come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the vampire world, Anne Rice's interview with a vampire flipped everything
Yeah.
around, right? And
Mhm.
that was really intriguing, to take this monster and learn his entire story, and with, from a very quote unquote human or humanistic perspective. That was
Mhm.
great. I think that was kind of a game changer as well.
Sure. And since we're talking about that, does the genre come to you first, or does the character come? I guess, or the theme.
Yeah, so in this case, honestly, the gag team came to me first, like Woodstock,
Okay.
Woodstake, right? It was just too good to pass up, the idea of a vampire at Woodstock. But I did honestly do my due diligence and say, is this, a joke, or is this a real story? And it took me
Yeah.
a while to find the real story in it. But I think often I start with the character,
Okay.
and the hero of this is not going to be who you think it is. So
Mm.
it'll be interesting to see. I'm not going to give anything away, but who kind of emerges as the ultimate hero is probably not who you expect at this point.
Cool.
I'm
All right.
excited.
Well, that is definitely the trigger there.
Sure. And then, so music is also a big part of this comic, right? Sets in
Yeah.
Woodstock and things like that. What, without spoiling, I guess, anything in the long term, what like musical icons would you like to see in this world? Or I guess like make
Yeah.
a cameo.
Well, so not giving too much away, but the climax, the third act, it centers around Jimi Hendrix. Um,
Ah,
because
I
it
knew
has
it.
to, because Jimi
Right.
Hendrix is the iconic, I mean, of all the iconic performers at Woodstock, and
Uh-huh.
he performed last.
Hmm.
And actually, that I don't know, I'm sure you've seen the Woodstock film. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but
Yeah.
there's just this shot of the camera pulling back on a sea of mud and garbage, and the people who remain. It's like a desolation, and that's my last shot too, is Jimmy's playing, the Star Spangled Banner, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have left, and you're just left with this mud and trash, and and everything else. So yeah, definitely Jimi Hendrix is key to this, in a lot of ways. So
Sure, because he's
yeah,
such a mythological person, too. I mean,
yeah,
there's so much story around him, what he was thinking about, how he approached music. It's just another animal,
Yeah.
another like,
Well, someone who
character.
came and changed that whole genre,
Yeah,
same
how to
idea,
approach a
same
guitar.
idea.
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah. I'm gonna do it my way.
Yeah, he was very original.
I just have to be careful with copyright around this stuff,
Oh,
because
absolutely, yeah.
like I can't write down lyrics because they're
Mm,
copyrighted, and if
okay.
I'm gonna sneak in images of people, you're thinking about the you know performers of a generation, like, so all the
Yeah.
photographs of them and everything, so we have to be really careful not to step on any toes. So we're going to
Okay.
list song titles, but we're not going to list, we're not going to write lyrics into it,
Verbatim.
and we're not going
Mhm.
to use any kind of stock imagery, and all of that. So we're going to
Okay.
try to be really careful. So yeah, there will
Yeah,
be a
that's
number of
another
touchstones.
interesting aspect, yeah, how he approached it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it too. Even when I was reading through it, you have Frank Zappa in one of your images and things like that. And I think there's a certain point where they become part of like public domain little bit, right? Um,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like a
the
cover.
iconography does.
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I honestly don't know. I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I'm just overly cautious. Being a small publisher, the last thing I want someone to do is be like, you can't use,
Yeah, for
that's
Yeah.
sure.
that's too close to this album cover, and that album cover is protected by blah blah blah. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, in that shot in San Francisco, we had, it's kind of like a record store. So the idea was
Mhm.
that it was just a poster, and it's all kind of silhouetted
Oh,
and not too detailed.
absolutely.
But
Hmm.
yeah,
That's good,
yeah.
that's good, yeah.
And for
And it,
those who know, it was Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, because
Yep.
yeah. So
Mhm,
you,
yeah.
you gotta
yes.
know your '60s a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I saw
It's one
that.
of my favorite, like,
Plastic
time
People by
periods,
the
like,
Mothers of
Pilsen music
Invention.
and things, yeah. Absolutely. There's so much the pioneering in that era and just how they wrote music and thought about it and shared it. Oh my gosh.
I think you picked the right time in history here.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'm glad to see you're doing other projects. I think that's a great segue here for us,
Yeah.
just to say, hey, everyone, keep an eye out. Keep an eye out what's coming up. Keep an eye out, like you said, on all the indie publishers, indie artists, and
Yeah.
we kind of use indie as a term of endearment here.
Sure.
It's like there is nothing really that separates you that far from the big boys.
Yeah. I guess
It's just
what does
vision.
indie mean to you, Sean?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, so I really think it's creator driven, right? So
Okay.
it's somebody, somebody is creating something on their own because they want to see it come to life, not necessarily because they think it's going to bring them fame or fortune or be a business model going forward. Um, so I am starting SHP Comics, so I am trying to build something bigger, but I do think, for me, indie is just doing it for the love of it, right?
Yeah.
And trying to bring your vision to life, whatever that vision is, and doing it on your own, like bootstrapping yourself. So whether it's
Hmm.
Kickstarter or friends and family, or an artist who's willing to donate some time because they believe in it, but it's putting it together one way or the other and getting it out there because you believe in it. That's sort of my sense of indie.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great Webster dictionary right there. Indie. Boom.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for coming on the
Yeah, thanks,
podcast.
Sean.
We really appreciate your time.
This has been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem.
Well, you gonna close us out?
Sure. All right. Well, this has been another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. Thanks for tuning in. This is Andrew Bonner
And Chris Ramos.
and
Shawn Hainsworth.
signing off.
Thank you, everyone.